The morning was quiet in the suburban neighborhood, the kind of silence that carried the smell of freshly cut grass and the faint hum of sprinklers. Inside his modest two-story home, Marcus Hale, a retired Navy SEAL, enjoyed the rare calmness of civilian life. He had fought battles overseas, endured grueling training, and seen more than most men ever should. Now, his daily routine revolved around brewing strong coffee, maintaining his small garden, and making sure his teenage daughter got to school on time. But beneath that calm surface, Marcus remained the kind of man who carried discipline in his bones and vigilance in his blood. That morning, as he adjusted the blinds and checked the lock on the front door, a habit he had never abandoned, he noticed a strange stillness outside. No joggers on the sidewalk, no kids riding bikes, just the unsettling sight of a black SUV creeping slowly down the street. Marcus narrowed his eyes, a flicker of instinct alerting him that something wasn't right. Moments later, the tranquility was shattered. With a thunderous crash, his front door was smashed open, splinters flying as a group of men in tactical gear stormed inside. They weren't the police, though their uniforms carried enough resemblance to make an average homeowner freeze in fear. These were enforcers hired by the neighborhood's homeowners association, a group that had long bullied residents under the guise of maintaining community standards. But this time, they had gone too far. "You're in violation," one of them barked, his voice booming through the hallway. Another raised a clipboard like it was an arrest warrant, though it was nothing more than a stack of HOA citations. The charges: Marcus had let his grass grow half an inch too high and had refused to repaint his mailbox according to the HOA's new color guidelines. For most neighbors, the intimidation worked. They would bow their heads, pay the fines, and repaint their mailboxes in regulation beige. But Marcus was not most men. He stood still in the center of the living room, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp, assessing every detail. He counted 6 men. 2 near the entrance, 3 moving deeper into the house, and 1 standing in front of him, trying to look authoritative. "You're trespassing," Marcus said evenly, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made the man hesitate. The leader smirked. "You signed the contract when you bought this house. We enforce the rules. You don't get a say." Marcus didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened. These men had not only violated his property but had terrified his daughter, who was now standing at the top of the stairs, wide-eyed and clutching the railing. That was the final straw. "Leave," Marcus ordered, his tone shifting from calm to commanding, the kind of voice that once directed missions in hostile territory. But the men laughed, mistaking his restraint for weakness. They shoved past him, one of them knocking over a framed photo of Marcus in uniform with his SEAL team. For a brief moment, Marcus simply watched. He was no longer just a homeowner dealing with a corrupt HOA. He was a soldier confronted with an enemy who had crossed the line. His instincts told him this wasn't the time for a fight, not yet. These men thought they were untouchable because they hid behind contracts and legal jargon, but Marcus knew another kind of justice. One that didn't come from paperwork, but from loyalty, discipline, and brotherhood. When the men finally left, leaving his door in ruins and threats hanging in the air, Marcus sat down at the kitchen table. He dialed a number he hadn't used in years, one that instantly reconnected him to the men who had once fought at his side. Within minutes, a familiar voice answered. "Hale, been a while. What's going on?" Marcus glanced at his daughter, then at the wrecked doorway, his voice steady as steel. "I've got a situation. The kind that needs a team." There was no hesitation on the other end, only the sound of purpose. "We're in. Send us the address." Marcus ended the call and leaned back in his chair. The HOA thought they could scare him into submission. What they didn't realize was that by targeting his home, they had awakened a force far greater than any homeowner they had ever bullied. His brothers weren't just soldiers. They were Navy SEALs, and they were on their way. The neighborhood had been silent when the HOA enforcers left, but Marcus knew the real storm was just beginning. And this time, it wouldn't be his door getting smashed. It would be theirs. The following day, the neighborhood looked deceptively normal. Neighbors watered their lawns, mail carriers strolled down the sidewalks, and children played under the watchful eyes of their parents. But behind that facade of suburban calm, Marcus was planning. His years in the Navy had taught him one unshakable principle: never respond with anger alone, respond with strategy. By late afternoon, the men he had once called his brothers began to arrive. They didn't come dressed in fatigues or carrying weapons. Instead, they blended in like ordinary visitors, an old pickup truck here, a motorcycle there. To anyone watching, it was nothing more than friends coming to see Marcus. But inside his house, the air carried the same weight it once did in briefing rooms before missions. There was Ramirez, the communications expert, who could infiltrate any network. Singh, the breacher, whose specialty was making sure no locked door stayed locked for long. Thompson, the quiet sniper, who rarely spoke but whose presence always meant precision. And then there was Cole, Marcus's oldest friend, a man whose leadership rivaled his own. Each one of them had left the service and tried to adapt to civilian life, but once together again, their instincts resurfaced. Marcus laid out the situation, not with dramatics but with clear, soldier-like precision. He explained the bullying tactics of the HOA, the harassment of neighbors, the unlawful intrusion into his home, and the fear in his daughter's eyes when the enforcers stormed inside. That last part settled it. No one around the table questioned what needed to be done. "They're not law enforcement," Ramirez said, scanning over documents Marcus had collected. "They're just muscle hiding behind a contract. Half the stuff they're doing is flat out illegal." Cole leaned forward, his voice low. "Then we treat it like any other hostile force. Recon first, then we hit where it hurts." That evening, the team split into pairs. Ramirez and Marcus drove slowly past the HOA headquarters, an overly polished building at the edge of the community, adorned with glass walls and trimmed hedges. The place screamed of self-importance. They noted the cameras, the guard at the door, and the black SUVs parked neatly in a row, no doubt the same ones that had invaded Marcus's driveway. Meanwhile, Singh and Thompson visited a few neighbors. It didn't take long for stories to pour out: fines for the color of curtains, threats over unauthorized garden decorations, even demands to tear down playsets for children. People were scared, and that fear only fueled the SEALs' determination. By nightfall, the team regrouped at Marcus's home. A whiteboard leaned against the wall, covered in notes and sketches of the headquarters layout. The atmosphere felt like old times: sharp focus, quiet intensity, and the unspoken understanding that each man would see the mission through to the end. "We're not here to hurt anyone," Marcus reminded them. "But they crossed a line. We're going to expose them, strip away their power, and make sure they never do this again." "Agreed, agreed," came the unified response. The plan was surgical. Ramirez would disable their security system remotely, leaving the headquarters blind. Singh would handle the entry. Thompson would stay outside, eyes on everything, ready to intervene if things went south. Marcus and Cole would lead the confrontation inside. They didn't need weapons. Their presence, their skill, and their discipline were weapons enough. The following night, under the cover of darkness, the team moved out. They were ghosts in the suburban landscape, blending into shadows and moving with a precision that no civilian security team could ever match. By the time the HOA enforcers realized something was wrong, it was already too late. Marcus felt that familiar rush, the one that came just before a mission reached its peak. But this wasn't about war or medals, it was about justice. This was about sending a message: you don't kick down the door of a Navy SEAL and expect to walk away unscathed. The headquarters awaited them, its lights glowing faintly in the night. For the HOA, it was just another evening. For Marcus and his team, it was the beginning of payback.